Battle Royale High School, aka Majin Den by Shinichi Kuruma. This is the only series manga work that Shinichi has been involved with. He's not worked on anything else as far as I can find. This is a shonen series that ran on Monthly Shonen Captain from May 18, 1986 to August 18, 1989. But we're not going to be talking about the manga. Instead, we're going to be talking about the OVA based on the manga. And the OVA was released on December 10th, 1987. So a year after the manga series started, but 2 years before the manga series ended. So yeah, this is OVA based off a series that at the time was not completed. And the OVA was directed by Ichiro Itano. Some of you may be familiar with that name. For those who aren't, Ichiro Itano is mostly popular for doing sci-fi series, especially mecha series. He's worked on the original Mobile Suit Gundam. He's worked on multiple Macross series, Megazone 23, Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, SSSS Gridman, Expelled from Paradise, and some other series that he's worked on is Angel Cop, Spirit Warrior, Violence Jack Evil Town, Gantz. But today we're going to be talking about Battle Royale High School. So Battle Royale High School is kind of a unique, crazy OVA in the sense that it kind of combines a bunch of different genres into one. Like things just kind of happen and I'm not really expecting them to happen when they do. Sometimes I'm not expecting them to happen at all. Because this is based off of a series that was ongoing at the time, and because the OVA is only about 60 minutes long, a lot of things get cut out, and the OVA is like really condensing the story. And because of that, things just aren't fully fledged out. Like characters just kind of seem to change without any lead up to them. Things just kind of happen. It's really confusing at times. And that just kind of goes along with the wackiness. Let's just cut right to the summary. We start off with our main hero. His name is Ricky. Ricky is a prodigy when it comes to martial arts. He wants to become the #1 fighter in the world. He wants to become like world famous and take on any challengers and beat them. And we see the entire school gathering around the karate club where Ricky, wearing a leopard mask, is fighting all the members of the karate club. And this is where the series truly shines, is in the fight scenes. As I said before, this is directed by Ichiro Itano. And Ichiro Itano is known for this technique that's actually named after him called the Itano Circus. And the Itano Circus is something that you've probably seen if you've watched any mecha series. Y'all are familiar with that scene where we see a mecha launching like thousands of missiles all at once, and then the opponent is just like flying through, trying to dodge all the missiles, and the camera is just like whipping back and forth, zooming in and out. We get like lens flares, fisheye lens. It's just a lot of kinetic, frenetic energy going on. That's basically the Itano Circus. He's the one that started that whole technique. And while we don't get a bunch of missiles being launched from mechas in this OVA, we do get the same kind of frenetic energy when it comes to the fight scenes. And so, yeah, the fight scenes are where this OVA truly shines. We have Ricky beating up all the karate club members until eventually he fights the teacher. And the teacher puts up a pretty good fight, but Ricky's able to beat him pretty quickly. And so Ricky leaves the karate club with his head held high, and the karate teacher ends up quitting. He's like, I got beaten by one of my students. There's nothing more for me to teach. I'm going to be quitting my job as a teacher. And because of that, the karate club is going to get disbanded. And that upsets one of the girls named Yuko Takayanagi. And Yuko is a member of the karate club. She is also Ricky's friend, but currently she is pissed off at Ricky because with the teacher gone, the club is going to get disbanded. And obviously, she's upset because she's a part of the club. She wants the club to keep going. And so she's begging Ricky to go apologize to the teacher. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. It was the teacher's fault. Like the teacher said that I wasn't allowed to quit the club unless I beat everyone in the club. And so he's the one that challenged me and I beat him. And if he wants to leave in shame, that's his prerogative, not mine. And that's when we cut to the Dark Realm, where we see Lord Biodu, the Demon King of the Dark Realm. Yeah. Remember when I said that the series was going to get pretty wacky? Well, this is the beginning of that. So Lord Biodu is being told by his servants that there's this prophecy about a legendary warrior with a leopard for a head who is siphoning power from Biodu. And so Biodu decides to investigate this by going to Earth. So he travels to Earth, where we see Ricky surrounded by his classmates. They all are like giving him their bentos and lunches and stuff like that because they believe he's going to become a celebrity soon, since he's going to go around trying to fight a bunch of people. So they want to, like, have the honor of saying that I fed a celebrity, I guess. And everybody freezes except for Ricky. Ricky is obviously confused, and he's like searching around the area. He opens up the door to the classroom, but instead of leading out into the hallway, it just leads into another classroom. And eventually, he opens up enough doors that he ends up on the roof of the school. And he's confused because he's like, I didn't climb any stairs. How am I up on the roof? And that's when he sees Lord Biodu. And Lord Biodu basically tells him about the prophecy and all that stuff. And he's like, but something seems wrong with all this. But first, I want to check something out. The Lord Biodu drops these spikes, and the spikes turn into henchmen that attack Ricky. And Ricky is able to beat them. And then he goes to face off Lord Biodu. But Lord Biodu easily subdues Ricky. He freezes him and then tells him that he believes that his henchmen have sent him down to Earth so that they can basically weaken him and take over his realm. And so Lord Biodu believes that he can gain his power by fusing with Ricky. And so he absorbs into Ricky, and the two of them merge, and now they share the same body. And that's when Ricky wakes up back in the classroom. Time unfreezes, and he believes the whole entire thing was a dream. But obviously, it wasn't. And then that's when we cut to outer space. And we cut to a space station where we see Zankin. And Zankin is a space-time continuum inspector. Yeah, I told you, this series is going to get really, really weird. So we go from Earth to the Dark Realm, and now we're in outer space with the space-time continuum police officer. And he's seeing like these weird spikes on Earth. A bunch of like spiritual powers are being spiked up. He's sensing demonic activity. And so he Star Trek beams himself down to Earth, where he puts on these special goggles, and he's like searching around the city, and he sees multiple spikes. And one of those spikes is coming from this guy named Toshimitsu Yuki, who looks a lot like Ricky and Biodu. So the thing about Ricky and Biodu is that they look very similar to each other as well. So now we got three people who all look the same: Ricky, Biodu, and Yuki. And then that's when we cut to an abandoned warehouse where we see the karate teacher. And the karate teacher meets up with a bunch of gangsters and picks a fight with them. And they attack him with swords and chains, and he beats them. At one point, he even gets stabbed in the stomach, but rather than acting like it is doing any damage to him, he just easily knocks the guy out. Then he turns to the female gangster that's there, lifts her up, rips her clothes off, so we just get tits flashing. And this just reminds me of how like 90s anime, especially like 90s anime OVAs and films and stuff back in the day, just had crazy nudity for no reason at points. Reminds me a lot of like the 80s and 90s action flicks. Well, just 80s and 90s movies in general, like anything rated R. You just get shots of tits for no reason. I kind of miss those days. Now everybody's like such a Puritan. But yeah, he's rips her clothes off for reasons I have no idea why. Maybe he's about to do something nasty to her, if you know what I mean. And then that's when Yuki shows up. And Yuki basically tells the guy to like leave the girl alone. And then that's when we see this moment where the teacher's guts start falling out because he was stabbed in the stomach earlier, and guts just fly out of his body, fall to the floor, and the female gangster passes out. And then that's when the teacher turns into something from like The Thing or Parasite. his body just kind of morphs into this like weird glob. He has all these like tentacles and things like that. And this is where I said earlier where like things get condensed, with characters turning crazy out of nowhere or just kind of acting different than the last time we saw them. Here's like the very first moment of that happening where we see the teacher. The last time we saw him, he was talking to Yuko and he was telling Yuko that he's resigning from school and that, the club is better off without him and stuff like that. And he's still normal here. And then the next time we see him, he attacks some gangsters. Looks like he's about to force himself on one of them. And then he turns into some weird parasite, John Carpenter's The Thing kind of monster. And we have no idea why that has happened at all. Like, there's nothing to explain that. He just starts morphing into this weird thing. And we have a fight scene. We even have a moment where like all this blood starts pooling on the floor. And Yuki almost starts falling through the floor, like through the blood, as well as the gangster lady. And eventually, Yuki's able to pull himself up and he stabs his sword into the teacher. And then he like sends out some kind of chi or spiritual power or whatever. But he basically blows a hole in the teacher's stomach and kills the teacher. And the teacher's now just a bunch of grotesque body parts lying on the ground. And he pulls the girl out of the blood. She's fine, just still unconscious. And that's when he sees this cat running away. And he realizes that the cat is part of the teacher. Like, as the teacher was exploding into gory bits, part of him transformed into this cat and is now trying to make his escape. So Yuki chases after this cat. And that's when we get more parasite-like moments where the cat sprouts wings and starts flying. And we have Yuki kicking open a sewer lid, grabbing it, and then tossing it easily with one hand. And the lid goes and it lops off one of the wings of this cat, causing the cat to fall. And then for some reason, the sewer lid flies back to Yuki like a boomerang, and he just puts the lid back into place. I'm like, how the hell did that happen? Like, sewer lids aren't boomerangs. You can't just throw one of them. Like, if you even had the strength to lift one up, you're not gonna be able to throw it and then it's gonna come back to you. But yeah, it comes back to him almost kind of like a frisbee. And so he chases after this cat, and we just get this kind of cool moment where the cat's like hissing at him, and he reaches over and there's this nail protruding from this wooden board near him. And so Yuki grabs the nail and then he just flicks it at the cat. And then, like a bullet, the nail just goes and it hits the cat right in the head. And the cat morphs into this weird kind of lizard creature. And it almost kind of reminds me of like Godzilla. If Godzilla were really, really tiny and walked on 4 legs instead of 2. But the Godzilla-like creature charges at Yuki, and Yuki lops his arms off and then hits it again, just blowing holes in it with his sword. And then that's when the creature starts melting. And then from this melted carcass, we see a fae pop out of the carcass. And then that's when he realizes that this fae is the one that infected the teacher and is going around causing havoc. And so Yuki ignites his sword and lights the body on fire, killing the fae and burning the carcass. And then that's when we cut to school the next day, where Yuki is outside waiting for Ricky, because Yuki can sense some demonic energy coming from the school. And so he's trying to figure out who it is coming from. And eventually he sees Ricky and he realizes that the energy is coming from him. And Ricky spots him and notices that this guy is, confronting him. And Ricky decides, okay, I'm going to kick this rock at him. There's just like tiny pebble on the floor, and he's going to kick the rock at the guy just to see how the guy is going to react. But as he's going to kick the rock, he misses, and instead he ends up kicking a car that's right next to the rock and sends the car flying at Yuki. And Yuki chops the car in half with his sword, causing this huge explosion of smoke and debris. And Yuki decides to run away for some reason. I have no idea why, but he just uses this time to disappear. Zankian is watching all of this, obviously. And he realizes, okay, I got two people now with high spiritual power. Something's going on here. So he decides to follow Yuki. And he sees Yuki running across the city until Yuki ends up at this one area where Ricky's at. So it's just kind of weird how, yeah, it's just like we have Ricky kicking the car, Yuki chopping the car in half, and then Yuki runs away. And I guess maybe Ricky runs away as well. And then Ricky ends up at this one location where Yuki runs and chases him down. I don't know. It's just this whole moment's just kind of weird. I would have liked it better if maybe we saw Ricky running away and then Yuki chasing after him. I think that would have been a little bit better than Ricky just disappearing in the smoke, Yuki running away, but then he's actually running to Ricky, who's in this other location. They confront each other where Yuki attacks Ricky and Ricky's kind of like apologizing. He's like, I didn't mean to kick the car. I meant to kick the rock at you. And Yuki knows that there's something going on with Ricky, that, he's the Dark Lord is within him. And that's when Byodu sends more henchmen to attack Yuki. And Yuki fights them, beats them down with his sword. And then he starts confronting Ricky once again. It's really weird because we have this moment where it's like daylight out. And then all of a sudden it just goes night. And then the background kind of disappears. And we just see like these weird clouds as Yuki's being attacked by these henchmen. And then once he beats them, we see Ricky. And Ricky feels something in his left hand. And all of a sudden, a hole appears on the top of his hand. Blood squirts out. And then Yuki pops out of the hand. So I'm just kind of like, okay, what the hell just happened here? Did Ricky somehow suck Yuki into his hand? So Yuki was fighting henchmen in another dimension. And now, since he beat the henchmen, he's able to escape the dimension by popping out of Ricky's hand. Like, this whole scene was just kind of weird. Once again, I feel like there's moments that we're missing here. And this is, like I said, one of the problems with the OVA is that they're condensing a lot to 60 minutes. But the thing also is that this is an OVA based off a series that's not done yet. You basically got a year's worth of manga story to work with. And this is from a monthly series. So let's just say you got about 12 chapters to make a 60-minute OVA. I don't know how you would need to condense a lot, especially if a lot of the manga is fight scenes. I don't know. I just feel like things were condensed a little bit too much. And so we just get a lot of like confusion going on. Where we just have, like I said, we have characters popping up, acting kind of weird the next time we see them. Moments like this where Yuki runs away from Ricky, but it turns out he's actually chasing Ricky. Then he gets sucked into Ricky's hand where he's fighting these other demonic creatures, and then he pops out of Ricky's hand. When did he go into Ricky's hand in the first place? Like, none of this is making all that much sense. And the thing is that a lot of movies and stuff out there have been condensed. Any movie that you see based off a book, the movie has condensed the book down. So there's still a way of condensing things and telling a coherent story. We're not really getting that here. It's just kind of weird. But yeah, he pops out of Ricky's hand, and basically the two of them start talking, and Lord Byodu explains, let's postpone our fight for later. Like, I know who you are. You're a demonic hunter. You want to hunt me down and kill me. But I have been betrayed by my servants in the Dark Realm. They have sent me here to weaken me, and they have come to Earth as well. One of them being the Fairy Queen. I see that you've met one of the fairies. Well, one of those fairies can create 30 other creatures. So by the time you took out one fairy, 30 others have been born. So how about we postpone our fight, and instead let's work together to fight the Fairy Queen, kill all the fairies, and then once that's done, we can fight each other. And then Yuki's like, all right, we can do that. So they part ways. And that's when we cut to the Fairy Queen. And the Fairy Queen has her eyes on this girl named Megumi. And Megumi is a girl that we saw earlier watching Ricky fight the Karate Club members. And Megumi is in love with Ricky, but she's too shy to tell him. And we have a moment where she's like staring at Yuko, and she's like jealous of Yuko because Yuko seems to be childhood friends with Ricky and spends a lot of time around him. And she believes that Yuko is in love with Ricky as well and is going to steal him away from her. So we have Megumi in her bedroom looking out the window, and she sees a falling star, and she makes a wish that Ricky will fall in love with her. And that's when a fairy shows up. And unlike the other fairies that we see, this one looks like a cute, adorable little fairy that you might see in a magical girl story. And this fairy basically says, I heard your wish. I can grant you, the power that you need to win Ricky over. And Megumi accepts. And then that's when we cut to Yuko, who's walking the streets at night. And she senses that someone is following her. So she throws her bookcase at him. And there's nothing there. So she goes to pick up her bookcase when all of a sudden a giant teddy bear shows up behind her. And the giant teddy bear is a giant version of the teddy bear that Megumi had. So you can see where this is going. And Yuko is like thinking that it's Ricky at first because Ricky wears the leopard mask. So maybe he's just wearing the teddy bear outfit to, I don't know, scare her or something. But eventually the teddy bear tries to attack her. And that's when Zankin shows up. And Zankin henshins into a tokusatsu hero. And no, I am not making that up. He henshins, and he looks like something straight out of the Metal Hero series. And Zankin starts fighting the teddy bear. So yeah, we have a tokusatsu fight between a dude in a metal suit and a giant stuffed teddy bear. And eventually, Zankin uses the gadgets on his suit to scan the teddy bear, and he realizes that most of the teddy bear is empty, but there's an actual teddy bear within the teddy bear. There's a small teddy bear within the giant teddy bear, and he believes that's the source of the power. So he shoots it with his gun, and then the giant teddy bear disappears, and then Zankin depowers his suit, and he turns to Yuko, and he explains who he is. He says, "My name is Zankin. I'm an inspector from the space-time continuum." Eventually, he ends up using this device to erase Yuko's memories, which just begs the question of why didn't he just do that in the first place? Why did he go and say who he was and introduce himself and all that stuff when he was just going to erase his memories in the first place? I don't know, but that's how he does things, I guess. And then we cut to the next day where Ricky's at school and Yuko is acting like a bit weird around him. Like she talking about how her memories are kind of fuzzy, and Ricky puts a hand on her head and is wondering what's going on. And it turns out that Megumi is watching this, so she sees Ricky putting his hand on Yuko's forehead and believes that they're getting lovey-dovey, and so she starts getting upset. And then that's when a classmate shows up and tells Ricky that there's some weird dude outside the school who's looking for you. And Ricky believes it's another challenge. So he goes to confront the figure, and it's Zankin. And so Zankin challenges him to a fight. So they go to the karate club, and they start fighting each other. And turns out that Zankin's a pretty damn good fighter when it comes to fisticuffs. But it ends up being a draw. They both end up doing a move on each other. Ends up being a draw. They decide to talk to each other up on the rooftops. And basically, Zankin is just explaining to Ricky who he is, about the fairies. Yeah, basically saying about how they should work together and things. And while this is going on, we cut to Yuki, who is praying in front of a Buddha statue. And the fairy queen shows up. And the fairy queen basically is trying to convince Yuki to join her side, because she's telling him that Lord Byodu, I know you have a temporary truce with him, but he's not someone that should be trusted. The whole reason why he's here is because he was the Lord of the Dark Realm, and he basically destroyed that place. He ruined it for everyone else that lives in the Dark Realm. And so we all got tired of his shit, and we sent him to Earth to hopefully weaken him so that we can destroy him, so that the Dark Realm would be more peaceful. Yeah, I need you to work with me so that we can stop him. And Yuki's like, I'm not going to believe in your lies. We have a moment where the fairy queen shows Zankin and Ricky talking. And Zankin basically explains, I know that Lord Byodu is in there, and I know that you're going to try to take over the Earth and stuff. I'm just telling you to knock it off. Like what you're doing now is fine if you're fighting the fairy queen and stuff. But once you start trying to take over the world, like I'm gonna have to put a stop to you. And then Ricky, or I should say Lord Biodu, is pretty much like, do what you gotta do, but you're not gonna be able to stop me from taking over the world. But for now, I'm just focused on the fairy queen. And so once again, Yuki, like he sees this, but he's still like, I still don't trust you. Like I get that Lord Biodu is bad, and I'm gonna fight him and I'm gonna stop him, but I need to stop you first. And then that's when we get this weird moment where she basically, I mean, she's naked, and she kind of rips off Yuki's shirt and shoves him face first to the floor, and then she crawls on him, and the way Yuki reacts, it's almost like, I don't know how best to explain this. It's almost like she's like getting ready to peg him, but instead she shoves her hands into his back and basically lays on top of him and starts melting into him. So they start like melting into each other, and basically they merge together into one entity. Yeah, we see Yuki walking out of the shrine with an evil smirk on his face because he's been taken over by the fairy queen. And then we cut to the school the next morning where we see Yuko, and Yuko is approached by one of the teachers who asks her if she's seen Ricky, because there's going to be a meeting with the teachers at the faculty lounge where they're going to be discussing about what's going to happen with the karate club and Ricky's involvement and the disbanding of that club and stuff like that. And so Ricky needs to be there. And so Yuko's like running around the classroom trying to find Ricky. Zankin, who's living on the rooftops of the school for the moment, gets a spike reading, and he confronts Yuki, and he's asking Yuki like what he's doing at the school. And then that's when he finds out that Yuki has been compromised, that Yuki is no longer Yuki, but has now become evil. And so he henshins into his metal hero suit, and we get a fight scene between Zankin and Yuki. And we have a moment where Zankin pulls out a lightsaber, basically. And the two of them just start fighting. Pretty cool animated fight. Like I said, the fight scenes are like the big selling point when it comes to this OVA. Jiro Utano knows what he's doing when it comes to action scenes. But meanwhile, we have Ricky. And Ricky is just walking through the class hallways when he peeks into one of the classrooms. And he sees the hooligans that we saw early in the OVA. The one that the teacher beat the crap out of. Well, we see them again, and they have this schoolgirl. They're holding her down, and they're getting ready to rip off her clothes and have their way with her when Ricky shows up, and Biodu takes over, and he just beats the crap out of all of them, including the female hooligan. So I guess the female hooligan didn't learn her lesson earlier, and so she tries to attack Lord Biodu, and he just punches the crap out of her, sends her flying through the air where she hits a cabinet and it falls on her. And it ignites a fire in the classroom and starts burning all the hooligans. And it turns out that these hooligans have become transformed. They've been infected by Fae. And so now they start morphing into these weird parasite, John Carpenter's The Thing kind of creatures. And he attack Lord Biodu. But Lord Biodu just easily beats them. He doesn't even have to lift a hand up when they all rush at him. Instead, he just uses his powers to lift them up into the air. And then he kind of uses like this weird electrical power that wraps around them. And then it forces them to like merge into a ball where they explode. So yeah, the hooligans are killed. And we cut back to Yuki and Zankin fighting. And they're just fighting all over the school grounds. Eventually they like fall into the tennis court where they start battling each other, and their fight is just causing a bunch of destructions. They're like hitting each other and just flying into walls, slashing holes in the ground. There's explosions going off, and this entire time I'm just wondering like, where are all the other students and faculty? Does nobody hear this? Are they in some kind of realm? Did time freeze? We didn't get to see anything where time froze. There was no indication that they got teleported into an ultimate dimension that looks exactly like the school but is empty. So yeah, it just, throughout this entire fight, I'm just kind of wondering like, is nobody hearing these explosions going off? Especially when the explosions are going off within the school itself. But yeah, nobody notices. Meanwhile, with Ricky, he goes to check out if the unconscious girl is okay. And it turns out that the unconscious girl is Megumi. And Megumi eventually wakes up in Ricky's arms, and she tells Ricky that she's in love with him. And Ricky looks down and he sees like her shirt's ripped open a bit, so he sees like cleavage, and then he like continues scanning her body, and then he sees like her thighs, and I guess this seems to win Ricky over, and he just kind of like embraces her, and then that's when all of a sudden her head just explodes into a shower of gore, and it opens up into this like giant maw, and then it clamps down on Ricky and eats him, just like rips him in half. So we got a scene straight out of Parasite. The very first chapter of the manga, the very first episode of the anime, very first few segments of the movie, the live action movie. You know that scene where the husband is talking to his wife, and then all of a sudden his face just explodes into like a giant maw, and then it bites her head off? That's what we get here. We get like that exact scene, only instead of biting Ricky's head off, it bites his entire upper body. It just bites it, crushes it, and he explodes into a shower of blood and gore. And then you're thinking, oh, well, Ricky's dead. Rip. But no, we zoom out, and then we see Lord Biodu in Ricky's body watching the whole thing. And I guess this entire thing was like a doppelganger or something. Maybe it was, I don't know. It's not ever really explained. To take a page out of Naruto's book, he has a shadow clone version that has gotten eaten instead of him. And I guess he sensed that something was off with Megumi. And so we get a scene where he decides to fight Megumi, who has now transformed into this weird, parasitic, John Carpenter's The Thing creature. And of course, Ricky is like, I want to save her. Megumi's still in there. A part of her soul is still in there. There has to be a way to save her. And so Lord Biodu is like, fine, whatever. And we just get this moment where this creature is just like sending out bits of body parts at it. It's like launching bits of itself at Lord Biodu, like bullets. And he uses his powers to stop all those. And then he reaches over and he grabs what looks like Yuki's face, and he puts some powers into his hand, and it causes the creature to explode. And then we see a moment where he like moves his finger across, and the background kind of changes. Like he's still in the classroom hallway, but things seem to get a bit darker. So then I'm like, okay, so is this the moment where we see that he put up like a different dimension? I don't know what you want to call it. For anyone who reads Dan to Dan, there's this part called the Void. And what the Void is basically whenever our characters are fighting like aliens or demons and stuff, they enter this dimension called the Void. For example, if the Void happens in a mall, then everything in the Void looks exactly like that mall. The only difference is that there's no people there. And any damage caused in the Void doesn't transfer to the real world. But it's basically an exact duplicate of the real world. So I'm wondering if that's what's going on here. Like when he moved his fingers across, if he teleported himself into what I'm just going to call the Void. And so when he was fighting the hooligans were in the real world. And now that he's killed the hooligans and then blew up Megumi, he's now teleported himself and Megumi into the Void. Meanwhile, outside, we have Yuki and Zankin fighting each other. And I'm assuming they're in the Void as well. Even though we never saw them get teleported into the Void, we never saw any of them activate the Void. I'm assuming they're in the Void because they're causing a lot of destruction to the school and a lot of explosion stuff, like I said earlier. And there's not one student or teacher around. So I'm assuming they're also within this ultimate dimension that's basically a replica of the school. But yeah, Zankin and Yuki are just blasting each other. Meanwhile, as that's going on, we get cuts of Ricky, and we have like a cool moment where he's basically absorbing the blood from Megumi, and the blood is like wrapping around his hands like rings, but they're moving like jigsaws. So it's almost like he has like jigsaw blades made out of blood around his hands. Meanwhile, Megumi's body morphs into this giant lizard creature, and Ricky is just using the jigsaw blood to slice at Megumi and just keep absorbing like the blood that she's spilling. So he's just constantly creating these jigsaws and using them to rip into her. Eventually, he just slices her up into pieces. Then he uses his powers to levitate all the pieces into this giant ball of flesh. And then this is when we get the coolest animated moment in this entire OVA, in my opinion. He holds out his hand and then he starts peeling out bits of flesh from this flesh ball. Like he starts pulling out like intestines and like what looks like threads of skin. And then it slowly starts morphing into a body, a human body. So we basically get a scene of Biodu in Ricky's body creating Megumi's body from scratch. So he's starting off with the skeleton, and then he's growing like the intestines and nervous system and muscles and skin. And so we basically have a human body melting in reverse. It's really coolly animated. Like I love this scene. It looks so awesome. But yeah, that's basically what's going on. And eventually he's able to completely form her body. And so Megumi is saved. Her body is back in one piece. She's no longer infected by the Fae. And her soul is back into her body. So she's completely fine. Meanwhile, the fights with Yuki and Zankin ends with Yuki throwing Zankin off a rooftop. Zankin falls to the floor and I guess gets knocked out. And then Yuki jumps down there, and I don't know if he's like getting ready to finish him off or what. But that's when Ricky shows up and confronts Yuki. And we have like a moment where Yuki uses his powers to rip a tree out of the ground and then throws it at Ricky. And Ricky just stops the tree. And yeah, the two of them are just like fighting each other back and forth. And we just get a lot of crazy action moments where we just have them like throwing each other through building walls and through classrooms. Things are exploding. Eventually, Ricky gets damaged because he's weakened right now. Like he's used a lot of Biodu's powers to save Megumi. And so Ricky and Biodu are very weak right now. So Yuki's able to do some damage to Ricky. Ricky decides to run away, and Yuki follows after him, following his blood trail. And as he's following after him, Yuki's visage starts transforming into the Fairy Queen. So it's still Yuki's clothing, Yuki's hairstyle, but now it's the Fairy Queen's face, a humanoid version of her face. And yeah, eventually she's following after the blood splatter when Ricky uses this to ambush her, and he like comes flying through one of the classroom walls and shoves the Fairy Queen into the wall. And Lord Biodu takes over and starts taunting the Fairy Queen. And that's when the Fairy Queen forms this unicorn style flesh horn on her forehead, and it like flies out and impales Ricky in the chest, and then it breaks off. And Ricky kind of like stumbles back. He's bleeding as there's this flesh horn impaled into him. And then the Fairy Queen rips off her clothes and transforms into Fairy Muscle Mommy. So yeah, this is you get this like weird, almost She-Hulk kind of fairy creature with just human tits. And she is able to basically send Ricky into the wall and just kind of holds him there. And she's about to finish Lord Biodu off when Lord Biodu starts laughing. And he's like, thank you for like impaling me, because Ricky is the one that was holding me back. Like Ricky was the one that was weakening me. But now that you've impaled me, you've weakened Ricky to the point where I can fully take over and I can unleash my magic, my full power. So he grabs the horn, rips it out. The Fairy Queen starts charging at him. They charge at each other, and we get the classic samurai moment where the two rush at each other and then they pass each other and then they just kind of stop. And then, we have like that pose where like wondering, okay, who hit who? And then that's when we see the Fairy Queen and her arms get lopped off. I'm just kind of wondering, how did her arms get lopped off, but not her wings? Because her wings are directly behind her arms. So if you lop off her arms, you're gonna get her wings as well. But somehow, yeah, her wings stay intact. She just gets her arms lopped off, and she turns around to face Lord Biodu, and then that's when there's a slit that appears in her neck, and blood gushes out, and then her head falls off. Because it turns out that he not only lopped off her arms, but he also lopped off her head. She just didn't know it. Then she falls to the floor and dies. And as she's dying, we get a bunch of like lightning that strikes the school and starts blowing it up. So the school starts just blowing up into pieces. We just see shots of like classroom blowing up, buildings blowing up. The entire school just erupts into a huge fury explosion. And then we cut to Ricky, and Ricky's back in the school and he's fine. So I guess that was just basically to show that the void was blowing up, and now Ricky's back in the normal world. And yeah, he's shirtless, and he remembers that Megumi, like what happened to her. So he rushes to see if she's okay. At the same time, we have Yuko, who's still running around the classroom trying to find Ricky. And eventually, she finds him in one of the classrooms, and she finds him in a compromising position because he has his hand on Megumi's chest as Megumi lays naked on the bed. And of course, he has his shirt off. And as we know, what's really happening is that he had picked up Megumi and he's taken her to the infirmary and he's putting her down in the bed. But Yuko doesn't know that. Yuko just sees a half naked Ricky standing over a fully naked Megumi, and believes that Ricky is going to do something terrible to this unconscious girl. And so she kicks him in the face and starts yelling at him. And as that's going down, we cut to Zankin, who wakes up on the rooftop. And then he realizes that, oh, guess Yuki's been defeated as well as the Fairy Queen. I think everything's all right. And then he's going to get teleported back to his space station. And it's just kind of like, well, what about the whole Ricky and Lord Biodu situation? Is that okay? Is that, like, are we going to do anything about that? Is Lord Biodu still a part of Ricky? Or did he die in the void? We have no idea. Because the last thing that we saw was Lord Biodu taking over Ricky's body and killing the Fairy Queen. And then all of a sudden they're back into the real world. What's going on there? I mean, I guess I can kind of say that it's fair for Zankin to just leave because Zankin, he had his memories of everything that happened erased. How that happened, I don't know. But yeah, his memories of the past event were erased. So Zankin has no idea about Lord Biodu and Yuki and the Fairy Queen and all the events that happened. He just finds himself waking up on this school rooftop, wondering what's going on. And then he goes back to his station. But what's going on with Ricky and Lord Biodu? How does that end? Are they still merged together? Is Lord Biodu back in his dark realm? Is Ricky okay? I mean, he's fine here, but as we saw earlier, like, you know, Ricky has shown moments where, you know, he's himself, but Lord Biodu's still in him. But yeah, that's not ever explained, so maybe it's answered in the manga. But yeah, that's how the OVA ends. It ends with Yuko seeing Ricky in a compromising position, attacking him, and then Zankin waking up with his memories erased. And all's well that ends well. Everything's back to normal, I guess. So that's it. There you go. There's Battle Royale High School. Like I said, like I enjoyed it, but I would not give it like a really high score or anything. I enjoyed it just for its craziness and its fight scenes. I feel like this actually could have been a really good film or OVA if it was maybe given another episode. Like instead of just a single OVA episode, maybe 2 episodes, or just make it a full feature length film. That way you wouldn't have to cut a bunch of things out. Like I feel like there's a lot of missing scenes. Well, I don't feel like there's a lot of missing scenes. There are a lot of missing scenes because yeah, the OVA had to condense the manga down. But there's a lot of things missing that would have been a lot better if they were in there. It would have made everything a lot more coherent. Instead, it's just we're cutting to a character who's acting completely different the next time we see them. We have moments that aren't fully explained. you've watched the review this far, so you know exactly the moments that I'm talking about. I don't have to go and explain all of them. But yeah, basically there are moments in this that probably would have made this OVA a lot better if they were in there. But since they weren't, things just seem kind of confusing at times. But outside of that, I like the action scenes. I like what the story was trying to tell. I feel like it didn't fully hit its mark because, again, it had to cut things out. But I can see what the story was trying to tell, and I like how unique it was. Like, I like the fact that we had what started off as like a martial arts movie turn into a demonic dark realm Lord Demon King. And then it cut to outer space where we had a space-time continuum police officer who can henshin into a metal hero, tokusatsu suit hero. And then we had like weird John Carpenter's The Thing, parasite kind of creatures that became this way due to these weird demonic fairies. Like there's a lot of just like crazy stuff in here, and I'm all for it. That's one of the reasons I freaking love anime and manga, is just because they have no problems just going absolutely bonkers with their story. And so I like all that stuff. But obviously, it could be a lot better if it just had more time. So overall, I would give this like a 6 out of 10. It's a good OVA. Not great, but good. Cool action scenes, interesting premise, some crazy wackiness, some cool animation at times. Especially the scene with Megumi. That whole moment where like her body is being created is just freaking awesome. And yeah, I highly recommend checking this OVA out. You can find it easily on YouTube. Just type in Battle Royale High School. I'm sure you'll find it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed. And if you got any anime that you'd like for me to do a review for, maybe an old film, an OVA or something, let me know. I'm always down to check out some new stuff. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later. So what did you guys think of that video? I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe, hit that bell for a notification, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And if you didn't enjoy the video, thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next video is more to your liking. Feel free to check out the playlist that you guys see, and I hope to see you guys next time. Later.